I am super glad to be on with you today. So I promised you yesterday that we'd be talking about omegas, and I promise you, omegas might not sound very interesting at first, but they are literally life-changing. So this particular video could be a life-changing video to you, especially during these times when we talk about deaths, right? Omegas have been correlated or corresponded to deaths in COVID, and I think that's a kind of an important thing. It's a big statement. So if we're going to make that statement, we got to figure out what the heck omegas are, right? So what omegas are your omega-3s. They're essential fats that your body needs for just a variety of functions in your body. Meaning they're essential fatty acids. You use them for things such as digestion. You use them for blood clotting. You use them for brain health. You use them even for muscle activity. Now, here's the thing. Recent studies have shown that people with an omega-3 index that's greater than or equal to 5.7, they had a lower rate of death from COVID-19. Simple, right? It's predictor. So what we know is that human beings have evolved on a diet of omega-6s to omega-3 fats. And ideally, what we found, according to the Yehuda study, it's closer to a 1-to-1 ratio. However, most Western diets, they have a ratio of 16 to 1. Or greater, right? So the shift in omega fats began during this industrial revolution when people actually began eating more omega-6 fats. And they ate those omega-6 fats at the expense of foods that are rich in omega-3. And this was really driven by the introduction of things like vegetable oils and cereal grains. So while many are becoming more aware over time, right? Everybody talks about omegas, but nobody really knows what they are. But about the importance of omega-3 fats to their overall health, they're really still unsure about how much is needed to actually make optimal levels. So like your vitamin D, you can guess, right? Or you can test, but you need to know your current levels. You need to know whether it's absolutely necessary for you to make these dietary adjustments to actually optimize your omega-3 levels. I would just make the assumption, though, that most of us are deficient. So your omega-3 index is a blood test that measures the amount of EPA and DHA. There are two types of fatty acids. They're on basically it's on your red blood cell membranes. So your index is expressed as a percentage of your total red blood cell fats. So an omega-3 index over 8 is associated with the lowest risk of death, from heart disease, while an index below 4, which is common in most European countries and the US, puts you at the highest risk of heart disease. It's as simple as that. Evidence reveals that your omega-3 index, it can also help predict your risk, listen to this, of death from COVID-19. So what they found was is that higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids were linked to better health outcomes. And this really came from an article that was published in January of this year when they looked at 100 people that had and looked at their omega-3 index and compared it to other COVID-19 outcomes. And with the patients with confirmed COVID-19 infection, they had their blood drawn 10 days after their diagnosis. And what they measured was whether, simple, the patient lived or the patient died, and what their index was at the time that they drew the blood. And here's what researchers found. As expected, there was only one death in the group which had an omega-3 index that measured 5.7 or greater. With the other group, a total of 17% of the people died. So when compared against older age, the researchers actually found that the risk of death from COVID-19 in individuals who had lower levels of omega-3 fatty acids was at least as predictive, now listen to this, as being 10 years older. And that's a big thing because they found that the death rate is hugely correlated to the number of years old that you are. And I think this really is confirmed, like past results that demonstrate that the average person in the United States has an index that's near 4%, right? And so I guess I want you to understand this, is that when we have high levels of omega-3 fats, the studies show that it stops what you've heard of the cytokine storm. So even though 5.5% is far below the optimal 8% measurement for omega-3 to omega-6 index, the protection that they found comes from what we call the EPA and DHA that they have on your body. So there was this paper, and I thought this was interesting. It was June of last year, right? It was in the Journals of Frontier Physiology, and they really kind of looked at how these fatty acids, these EPA and DHA supplementation, can actually alter all the biologic pathways in your body, which would have a direct influence on the outcomes of COVID-19. I bet you didn't hear this in the news, right? Nobody was talking about that. So what the authors wrote, it was that omega-3 fatty acids, they're important, and this is incredibly important because of the direct influence on your immunological response to any viral infection. They play a key regulatory role in the cytokine storm that devastates so many people that get sick with COVID. When they looked at their tissue levels of omega, they've said that the impact, the downstream anti-inflammatory process in the process of COVID-19 was so impacted by omega-3s. And they also said that it's important that animal-based omega-3s are used, especially the DHA, because those are the ones that have been demonstrated to prevent things like the blood clot formation, which is so devastating to so many people. Also, the reduced platelet aggravation, that's the thing that is devastating to people. So blood clots, like I said, are a complication of COVID-19 infection, and that's what produces many of the lethal consequences that we see. So omega-3 index, it's a predictor also of all-cause mortality. That means in addition to reducing your risk of death during the pandemic, maintaining a good omega-3 index with optimal levels, check this out, it can actually reduce your potential risk of all-cause mortality. That means cardiovascular disease. That means coronary heart disease. And so according to data that was published just a couple years ago in 2018, people whose omega-3 index was over 6.8, they had a 34% lower cause of all-cause death and a 39% lower risk of cardiovascular disease when compared against those that were measuring less than 4.2. Don't get caught up in the numbers because we'll tell you about a test you can do. But last year they studied 427,000 people aged 40 to 69, and they looked at whether the omega-3 fish oils actually had a protective effect on their cardiovascular health. And after studying the people, guess what happened? They found that the people that did not take omegas, they found that when they're comparing them, they found that the fish oil didn't reduce the all-cause mortality in those people. The people that did, their mortality went down 13%, and their risk of cardiovascular disease went down by 16%. Taking omegas is essential to your health. Not only does it do that, but it helps your diabetes, it helps your brain, it helps more. Well, that's one of the lesser known benefits of omega-3s is that they also have an impact on autoimmune diseases like diabetes, or specifically type 1 diabetes, that occurs when the pancreas actually stops producing insulin. And this is a different type of, this is different than type 2, when your cells actually become insulin resistant. But last year, a study actually showed that adults who tested positive for markers of type 1 diabetes could actually significantly reduce their risk of onset by eating omega-3 fatty-rich foods. 5 years earlier, it was found that those who ate one or more servings of fatty fish per week, it actually had a reduced risk of what they call latent autoimmune diabetes as compared to those who just got one per serving per week, which was actually, and this was actually due because the people that didn't get the fish didn't get the omega-3s. DHA is also crucial for your brain health because it's essential. It's an essential structural component of your brain, and it's found in high levels throughout the neurons. Remember, your brain controls the function of your body, so it's found in the neurons, the cells of your central nervous system. So when you intake an inadequate amount of omega-3s, the nerve cells become stiff, they become more prone to inflammation, and the missing omega-3 fats, and that's because those missing omega-3 fats are substituted with omega-6s. So once your nerve cells become rigid, once they become inflamed, proper neurotransmission from cell to cell and within cells actually becomes compromised. So guys, look, low DHA levels, they've been linked to memory loss. They've been linked to Alzheimer's disease. And actually out there are studies that show that degenerative brain diseases, they actually might be potentially reversible when you have enough omega-3s, specifically DHA. So not only are omega-3s good for COVID, they're good for heart health, they're good for preventing diabetes, they're good for your brain, but they've also been found to actually be essential in reducing inflammation. Wow. That's why we give, when people come in pain, we give them omega-3s, the inflammation with like rheumatoid arthritis and even menstrual pain. They've also been found to optimize muscle growth, including in people with cancer and bone strength issues. And this is actually what has been shown to lower the risk of osteoporosis. It's also been shown to improve the symptoms of metabolic syndrome or type 2 diabetes and reduce the risk of kidney diseases and colon cancer. Should I go on? It improves mental health. It's been shown to improve behavior health. It's been shown to protect your vision. So where you get your omega-3s matters, though, guys. It's important to remember that there are crucial differences between what they call the marine or animal-based and plant-based omega-3 acids. The ideal source for the EPA and DHA are not only marine or animal-based, but they have to include things like fatty fish, wild caught, Alaskan salmon, sardines, herrings, anchovies. Look, if you don't eat these fish on a regular basis, you got to consider taking a supplement. Everybody should consider taking a supplement. It's vital to remember that the type of fish that you choose to eat is also important. When we looked at farm fish, including farm salmon, it's best to avoid them altogether because they have this huge potential for contamination. And because they're mostly fed genetically engineered soy, genetically engineered yeast, they're fed chicken fat, which is completely unnatural diet for a fish, right? And they're actually loaded with hazardous omega-6 fats. So when the fish are fed these dangerous linoleic acids, it doesn't correct a high omega-3 it doesn't correct that ratio there. It destroys that ratio. So from a nutritional perspective, farm salmon only have 50% of the omega-3 of wild salmon and 25% of the vitamin D. Look, you can't mess with nature. Good news is Alaska doesn't permit you to do aquaculture, so Alaskan is all wild caught. In the past, sockeye salmon was another good choice. So for this reason, it's just best to avoid sockeye salmon in general unless you can verify that it's wild caught. Look, guys, I just covered a lot of stuff, but the key is this, is that your omega-3s are absolutely essential. That's why they're called essential fats. You have to have the right ratio. We always say you test, don't guess. That's why we run a brain span test in the office. If you have any questions on it, I think we have probably 5 or 6 of them in stock. You can just look it up at brainspan.com. But the point is this, is you got to know your ratio if you ever want to have a fighting chance of being healthy. You got to take your omega-3s. That's why we're also this week, to be able to support you in that process, we're giving a 10% discount on all of our omega-3s that we have in stock. If you have questions on which one to take, just make sure you ask one of your team members. As always, if you have questions, put them down below. We'll make sure we answer them. But if this was valuable to you, if you think that it's important for the world to know that they have to be taking their omega-3s to be able to have their heart, their brain, their body, their immune system, everything working right, and then I think that it's an opportunity for you to be able to share this with the world. So give a thumbs up if you like it. If you need more information on things, just put it down in there or direct message me. This is Dr. Osborne. Have a blessed day. Remember, we change minds before spines. If we can change our minds, we can change the world. Have a blessed day.